Fallout fans heartbroken over canceled game. We could have been heading to the south. It is sometimes easy to forget that Bethesda was not always the brains behind the much-loved Fallout series. With Bethesda taking over for Fallout 3, before that and for 2 released entries, the post-apocalyptic RPG was headed by Interplay Productions. And listen, I know it's not hard to find reasons to wag the finger at Todd Howard and the other executives over at Bethesda, but lately I'm finding almost daily examples of how Todd Howard hates me personally. Hello fellow travelers and welcome to the Hard Light Network. So what up everybody? Today we are back at it talking about Bethesda again and how they continue to rob us of our joy. And listen, I know it's not hard to find reasons to wag the finger at Todd Howard and the other executives over at Bethesda, but lately I'm finding almost daily examples of how Todd Howard hates me personally. And for those of you who've been following my channel for really any amount of time, you'll probably know that Fallout 76 inflicted a grievous injury on my relationship with this company. But this article I found about a week ago really just rubs salt into that wound. But before we get into it, guys, if you want to support this channel, please do not forget to like this video, leave a comment down below, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any content we have coming up in the future. And if you wanted to go that extra mile to support the channel, there is a super thanks option down below. But that being said, let's get right into this article. So today's reading comes to us from the Gaming Bible, written by Angron, Primarch of the... Wait a second, that's not right. Angharad? Angharad?
Welsh, Latin. Welsh name. Angharad.
Anyway, Avatar Ang here writes, Fallout fans heartbroken over canceled game. We could have been heading to the south. It is sometimes easy to forget that Bethesda was not always the brains behind the much-loved Fallout series. With Bethesda taking over for Fallout 3, before that and for 2 released entries, the post-apocalyptic RPG was headed by Interplay Productions. As a result, its confusing lineage makes it difficult to remember that Fallout has been home to multiple spin-off titles, one of which includes 2001's Fallout Tactics by Micro Forte. The Brotherhood of Steel RPG was met with mainly positive reviews, but as you could probably tell, it did not stand the test of time, with many forgetting it even existed at all. And while it might be true that many people have forgotten this title, I certainly have not, as it's one of my favorite Fallout games of all time. And it really was a great game, done in the same CRPG top-down style as the first and second game, but rather than focusing on a single playable character, you took control of a squad of Brotherhood of Steel initiates. Your fully customizable squad could be tailored to any encounter. There was a full list of recruitable NPCs, and you could even pilot vehicles, everything from armored personnel carriers down to tanks. And due to these additions in the gameplay, it was a lot closer to the 1988 game Wasteland that inspired the franchise overall. And the multiplayer was absolutely awesome, allowing you to create not only human characters, but super mutants and ghouls as well. You even had an adjustable budget to kit them out with whatever skills and equipment that you wanted for the maximum amount of enjoyment. And what's even more amazing is you can get a DRM-free copy with offline installers from GOG for only $10. And if you still wanted to access the multiplayer functionality, you can do so by downloading the free Game Ranger app from their website, like I described in my Fall of an Empire video. Now back to the article. However, thanks to a recent interview with PC Gamer and Fallout Tactics lead designer Ed Orman, we now know that a possible sequel was on the cards. Quote, somewhere in the ether there is a document, Orman explained. I don't know if it exists anywhere, I certainly don't have it, but there is a spec for the Tactics 2 game. It was a smaller campaign, still the same structure, but having established it, we would simplify the economy, simplify the number of objects and weapons in the game. With Interplay going bust, the sequel never came to fruition, but Orman was happy to explain what could have been for the Fallout spin-off. Quote, it was heading into the Deep South, which gave us lots of opportunities for new mutations and creatures and things you hadn't seen before in Fallout, and new factions and all that sort of stuff. There were lots of ideas, and I think it would have probably addressed a lot of the different problems that we had discovered, which, if we had more time, we would have fixed. so instead, we were just going to fix them in the sequel. The sequel would have included intelligent plant hybrids, lush environments, and guerrilla warfare, but unfortunately, this never came to pass after Bethesda's arrival. However, you never know. Maybe a Fallout title taking place in the Deep South will be on the cards for the future. And honestly, I gotta tell you guys, the Brotherhood of Steel rolling up to Dixieland would have been absolutely wild for the Fallout franchise. But before we cover some of the other elements of that interview mentioned earlier, I did want to talk about how a few of the elements from Fallout Tactics actually did carry over to Bethesda's version of the franchise. One notable example is the attitude towards recruiting local talent that the Brotherhood in Fallout Tactics had versus the West Coast Brotherhood of Steel. Much like the East Coast Brotherhood set up in Fallout 3 with Elder Lions, the Fallout Tactics Brotherhood actually had a much more liberal recruiting practice, allowing locals to join their ranks. But it didn't just stop at human tribals, because this iteration of the Brotherhood of Steel was willing to recruit ghouls, humanoid robots, and even super mutants and deathclaws. And for that reason, the Fallout Tactics Brotherhood of Steel was a lot more egalitarian and was actually a lot more versatile in their application of battle tactics. Another parallel that they share with the East Coast Brotherhood is the utilization of airships to travel. And it may or may not be related, but Mission 6 of Fallout Tactics is titled Quincy and takes place in a town of the same name, which is also the name of a settlement in Fallout 4. So even though the Tactics spinoff is largely ignored by Bethesda, that didn't stop them from ripping a bunch of ideas from it. But anyway, let's hop over to that interview mentioned earlier with PC Gamer in this article to see what some of those ideas could have been. Quote, Orman reckons one of the issues with Fallout Tactics was feature creep and a tight deadline, which made balancing a nightmare, but streamlining the sequel allowed it to double down on the real-time elements. It really embraced the real-time aspect, says Orman. I don't think we were ever going to be able to let go of turn-based, but definitely, front and center, it was supposed to be a real-time version. Orman was blissfully unaware of how bad things were at Interplay, and instead focused on what the team could fix in the game that just shipped. We got to reuse all of the assets, in theory, except for the new content needed for the new campaign, says Orman, and it was heading into the Deep South, which gave us lots of opportunities for new mutations and creatures and things you wouldn't have seen before in Fallout, and new factions and all that sort of stuff. There were lots of ideas, and I think it would have probably addressed a lot of the different problems that we had discovered, which if we had more time, we would have fixed, so instead, we were just going to fix them in the sequel. As for the story, it's a doozy. We were talking about having an Eve kit that was basically taking on the role of the robots in Fallout Tactics 1, says Orman. The idea was that there was an Eve kit that was creating intelligent plant hybrid things, so the plants were going to be the big problem. And by intelligent plants and going to the south and having really lush environments, that was going to make that more interesting, because now you can't tell the environment from the enemies, and there's a more guerrilla warfare sort of feeling to the missions. I don't know how far we got with that, I just thought it was a cool idea. Funnily enough, the Atlantic City-based expansion of Fallout 76 explores similar ideas, another example of Tactics' quiet influence across contemporary Fallout. It's a bit of a parallel evolution, laughs Orman. Some of these ideas just naturally come out of the setting. And you know what's funny? Apart from the Fallout 76 expansion, we actually saw a microcosm of this idea executed in another fan-favorite spin-off, Fallout New Vegas. And for those of you who played it, I'm sure that you remembered the semi-intelligent plants as well as the mutated vault dwellers of Vault 22. And the spore carriers in that vault actually implemented some of that guerrilla warfare type vibe that they were talking about for the setting of Fallout Tactics 2. But anyway, let's wrap up the rest of this article and finish the video. Unfortunately, Interplay was about to go bust in spectacular fashion. Micro Forte may have just shipped a reasonably well-received game in a major series, but like many studios, it was brutally affected. Yes, that time was awful, says Orman. I didn't like it, but it was worse for everybody who lost their jobs. I was still pretty young, but it was probably the first time that being in a lead position, I realized what the real responsibility of that meant. Trying to make it okay for the people who lost their jobs and make it okay for the people that stayed. We found out 2 or 3 days before we had to tell everybody else, and I wasn't allowed to tell anybody. So to sit on that knowledge, that's just the responsibility that you have. So that sucked. The way it was handled sucked as well. It was not well done. I understand the economic realities of it. I know why it had to happen now. Being naive back then, I didn't. I was raging against this injustice. If there's no money, then you've got to let people go. I get it. You can do it good or you can do it bad. But it's always a shame. You really do form a lot of bonds with the people you work with, and then just to kill that is awful. This cycle of hiring people up and killing them off and hiring them up, it's so wasteful. It doesn't even make economic sense, let alone the human toll of the damn thing. Fallout Tactics 2 went by the wayside, and Orman eventually moved on. The original remains of the series' greatest oddity, and whatever Bethesda says officially has had a big influence on the contemporary wasteland. There's plenty more to come out of our interview with Orman, who is philosophical about Tactics' place in the wider Fallout universe. Little bits and pieces of Tactics you can see are kind of canon now, just through the back door over time, says Orman, and it's good enough for me. And there you have it, guys, the sad story of yet another victim of Bethesda's acquisition of the Fallout franchise. And look, guys, I get it. I loved Fallout 3 and Fallout 4, but I would be remiss to say that I'm not at least curious about what would have been with Fallout Van Buren and Fallout Tactics 2. I also understand the economic realities of creating titles like this, and something is definitely better than nothing. But as a fan of the OG franchise and Fallout Tactics in particular, I'm definitely one of those heartbroken few who didn't get to see this title come to fruition. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much to everybody who has watched up to this point, and if you want to support this channel, please do not forget to comment what you think down below, as well as subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the new content coming up. What are some of your speculations on what would have been with Fallout Tactics 2, and what do you think carried over to the other games in the franchise? Personally, I like to think if this game did come out, we would have gotten Gator Claws way before Fallout 4's Nuka World DLC. The speculations could certainly be endless, but anyways, thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, leave a like, and until next time, love you guys, safe travels.